Coffee. From bean to brew. Coffee is universal, domestic, and historical. It is a drink made from the bean of a plant species called cafea. The process and the specialty of the time, work, and hours put into making the coffee we know today is so complicated that even the cherries themselves must mature up to a year before they can be picked and used. The trees also need to age up to 7 years and can only be about 20 years old before the cherries lose productivity. All this time and effort just to make a couple coffees for the world. Up to 50% of the American population drink coffee, and therefore I feel like it needs to be understood, as well as appreciated, because it is an important drink in our day-to-day lives. The history behind coffee is an intriguing one. According to legend, a man in Ethiopia named Kaldi found his goats wild and unwilling to sleep. He wondered why his goats were like this until he eventually found out they had eaten a cherry. This cherry gave them unusual energy, and so Kaldi gave this cherry to monks, who found out that this cherry could give them enough energy to go through evening prayer without getting tired. And so the cherry from the coffee plant was discovered and spread across the world, eventually becoming the coffee drink we know and love today. In order to start brewing this coffee drink, you must start with an unprocessed seed. The seed is called the green seed, which can be planted in a shaded nursery for its growing time. Direct sunlight can harm this sprout, and therefore the seeds must be kept shaded and watered frequently in order to keep from drying up. Once the plant grows enough, it can be taken outdoors to grow permanently. After the tree starts to produce cherries, the harvesting season is ready to start. There are two different types of cherry harvesting. One is called the strip pick, and the other is called the selective pick. The strip pick is when all the cherries are stripped off the branches, either by hand or machine, one at a time, and later categorized into ripe and unripe piles. The selective pick, however, is only by hand, and when the only ripe cherries are picked, those are the ones that should be harvested. Once all the cherries are picked, processing the cherries must begin. Like harvesting, there are two methods to process cherries. The first method is the dry method. This is when the cherries must be spread on a big surface in the dry sun. They must be raked and turned often in order to prevent spoiling. These cherries cannot get wet, so in order to avoid this, the cherry farmers tend to cover them with the tarps at night or in the days they think it will rain. The second method is the wet method. During this process, the pulp of the cherry must be removed after harvesting, and the rest of the bean is dried with the parchment skin left on. After this drying, the beans are separated by weight and sent into a water-filled fermentation tank for 12 to 48 hours. Once they are out, they will be rinsed once more and ready for drying again. In the final steps of the coffee process, the beans need to be sent to the mulling machine and eventually exported. This machinery will remove the parchment layer of the bean and eventually remove the entire dried husk. The beans will be looked over for flaws or imperfections, and those that are imperfect will be removed. After the inspection, the sorting is done by size and weight, and then they will be exported to the coffee shops ready for roasting. Roasting a coffee bean is what turns that green bean into a brown aromatic bean that we recognize as a coffee bean. In order to get the beans perfect, they must be kept moving at a controlled temperature environment at 550 degrees. Once their internal temperature reaches 400 degrees, they turn brown and become fragrant because of the oils being locked inside. The beans must be immediately cooled to keep their fragrance aside and the temperature controlled. Once that is all finished, the beans will be grinded into small bits for any kind of brew you want. Whether it's espresso, slow drip, K-cups, or any other kind of coffee, it will come from the same beans. The only difference it makes is the shape of the grind and the water pressure that eventually turns that grind into coffee. Coffee is an exciting, timely managed drink that many people enjoy on a regular basis. However, what many people don't realize is that coffee can have positive qualities. Studies by Chris Gunner on the Healthline Journal states that coffee can boost energy because of the caffeine in the coffee itself. Because of the caffeine, coffee can also improve physical activity by increasing the epinephrine levels in your blood. This is what prepares your body for physical labor. And since your body is ready for that labor, the caffeine will also help burn more fat. Coffee can also help lower one's risk of death by diminishing type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, types of cancer, and Parkinson's disease. Studies have shown that those who drink a daily cup of coffee reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes by 7%. Along with eating healthy and staying hydrated, drinking coffee can also affect and slow down the risk of Alzheimer's by 65%. And finally, the caffeine in coffee somehow helps those with Parkinson's disease between 30 and 60% in slowing down that process. As you can see, the caffeine in coffee is helpful. While not completely accurate, it can be good for those with diseases and help those wanting to work out and lose weight, along with also tasting good in the process. Coffee is a delicacy that has a very intriguing taste and very astonishing process. As you can see, coffee is essential to life, and it can have many health benefits along with giving energy. Most Americans drink some sort of coffee drink, whether it's a frappuccino, a brew, any of those. And therefore, the knowledge behind how coffee is found and made should be familiar to the American people.